Works.
Everybody's here, and if you don't mind, we can kind of get started. You don't yet have the first item on the agenda is the appointment of a committee chair and vice chair. The bylaws, state that the chair and vice chair shall be one of the two, board members to serve on the committee. So our recommendation is that you guys, decide amongst yourself who's gonna be the chair and vice chair for the coming calendar year.
Well, I recommend Eric for chairman.
Of course. That's fine.
Does that mean, that Wayne Peterson will be the vice chair?
I can't get out of that one, so.
No.
All right, good deal. Okay, well, the chairperson can take over. Agenda here.
You.
We're on agenda item 2, status of expected general order of wastewater. We will receive an update on the status of the expected general order of wastewater.
All right, Justin, if you want to just kind of.
This is gonna be brief. So, you may recall back in 2023, May of 2023, we received a notice from the Regional Water Control Board that we're gonna be enrolled into a new general permit. This new general permit is gonna be applied to all large dischargers of domestic waste, of 100,000 gallons larger. So approximately 43 treatment plants or entities between Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara are going to be enrolled in this new general permit. We turned in all of our necessary applications and documents in the end of June 28th, 2023. And although there's been a few communications, the most recent of which was in November of 2024, we still don't have the draft permit. And so we're still in a holding pattern until we get that draft permit. The Regional Water Control Board reached out in November and said that they were still working on it and, have plans to send it our way for review. We allocated funds even in the 24-25 fiscal year for consultants to help us professional services with a review of that if needed, and to meet with the Regional Water Control Board if desired to help us through this process. Unfortunately, we're still in this holding pattern. We're not necessarily reaching out proactively to the Regional Water Control Board and trying to urge this along, and so
It might be somewhat helpful to realize that this was all expected. There was no surprise here. We're one of the smaller plants, and so we weren't one of the targets initially. This has been going on for several years now. So most of our neighbors have been enrolled. The larger agencies have been enrolled early on. We knew we would be kind of later because of our size. And we're not a troublesome wastewater operation. We don't have a history of significant violations or needs to have a lot of eyes on us. And so kind of knew that it'd be kind of delayed. But the permit is, the results of this new permit are predictable. We know what the limits are gonna be, and they're much more stringent than we're dealing with now, and there are limitations on that, on constituents that we don't have to monitor or report on today. So all in all, the goal of the new permit is, the expected goal of the new permit is to make the water quality better on discharge. But that's gonna come with better means more regulated and in all likelihood, more costly for us, meaning more costly for our ratepayers eventually.
Is there a negative, like obviously you guys turned in all your documents within a timely manner. Is there at any point that you can't shut it down for any reason, right? Like, especially if the permit's in their court, correct?
Right.
So it's kind of like, there's not gonna be any negative repercussions by them dragging their feet. Hopefully.
There shouldn't be.
Okay.
There shouldn't be. The repercussions, they're really when we get a permit, there'll be a certain time frame put forth to achieve those results, and then there'll be an opportunity for us to request more time. And so really, by them dragging their feet, we're inadvertently getting more time to
Sure.
accomplish that.
Okay. Hurry up and wait.
Agenda item 3.5 PFAS testing description. An update regarding the UCMR5 requirement for PFAS compounds and potential implications to the district.
I think we have just a few slides to share.
Of course.
Was this meeting in Zoom?
It is.
Just because I'm not educated.
What
What does
is it?
PFAS stand for?
These are forever chemicals we see from Teflon and other types of
Okay.
styles of coatings, things of that nature that could leach into groundwater. And basically, one of the difficulties finding is the filtration process.
Okay. So it's taking our current water quality and making sure that it's under a certain regulation. It's for PFAS.
And we're gonna start there. We're gonna start at the ground level. We're gonna begin, looking at what is.
Go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry, okay, good. Just to give me a little
Slide.
something. to-
Next slide. So this has been kind of an evolution of sorts and testing of water systems, testing of wastewater treatment systems. PFAS is found now, I think originally it said something like 5,000. Now, some of the more recent documentation I found is saying something like 14,000 different products. Dental floss, non-stick cookware, waterproof, water repellent type products, Scotch Guard, I mean, furniture, carpet, it's everywhere. PFAS and the compounds associated were made through companies like 3M and DuPont. Over 30 different compounds, two of which are focused on primarily and spoken about are PFOA and PFOS. And you'll see later in these slides, the new MCL, the new contaminant threshold, the ceiling for both of those. And so then, in general, the EPA is moving forward with testing requirements under the UCMR5 due to the exposure of these compounds being, cause adverse health effects. So it's kind of, again, it's an evolution, more testing is being had. And so, next slide, please. So under the UCMR5, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, moved on by the EPA. So this is at the federal level. State Water Resources Control Board also has their own set of guidelines and monitoring systems as well. Right now, this UCMR5 is dictated by the EPA. It's being kicked off by the EPA. And so then they set as recent as April of 2024, they set the PFOA and PFOS MCL at 4 parts per trillion. That's nanograms per liter. It's very small, very small amount. And so they required, as a part of the UCMR5 guidelines, to sample water systems would have to sample between 2023 and 2025. They're at certain sites. For us, it would be our active wells. And so when we registered into this system, we were given January through December of 2025 would be our window, our opportunity to go out there and sample all of our active wells. So it would be 7 active wells, though Platts we're amidst a rehab project right now with Platts 4. If Platts 4 is back online, by June, then we will be sampling all 7 of those locations for PFAS type compounds. And I just wanted to note that the requirements for sampling for PFAS, because it is in over 14,000 different products, it's very stringent. It's I've heard of folks not doing certain things for the 24 hours, whoever's you're gonna be your sampler, not doing certain things, using certain types of products to be able to control that, in the process of sampling, you're not lending to contributing to PFAS in some way. So it's very strict. And so during this next 6 months of sampling, if there is a good news here is the EPA is providing all necessary samples, all necessary, the shipping. What our staff will receive is a cooler full of sample bottles and directions. And we'll have to go out into the field, into those 7 active wells and follow certain protocols and sample at those sites. Typically, there's also a control sample that's had at each one of those locations as well. All of those samples are collected inside of that cooler, sealed back up, dropped off at a shipper, and then that's sent off to the EPA's lab for analysis, and then you're provided those results, following. If we could look at the next slide, please. So this was just to kind of picture what is 4 parts per million. I found a lot of different representations of this. Some are using 20 swimming pools. This one was good enough. I mean, so a drop in 5 swimming pools. It's such an incredible. They keep lowering the threshold. In 2019, it would have been the notification response limit, and they keep lowering these limits, and now we're down to 4 nanograms per liter, or 4 parts per trillion. So it's just an absolute. It's a very small 1 drop in 5 Olympic swimming pools. Next slide, please. So the initial monitoring was to be had in 2023 to 2025. I want to point out that the following items are if you had results that dictated additional monitoring, sampling, then you would have to follow those requirements included in the CCR. That's our customer confidence report, and participate in public notifications. Ultimately, 2029 would be your compliance deadline. And your compliance deadline, if we look at the next slide, that would be, ultimately you'd be looking at treatment. And I think we were talking about that earlier, just a moment ago. We were talking about some of the treatment, options. Whoops. It's a test. He does this. Okay. Yeah.
You go down to the bottom right corner where that little, the bar is in the bottom right corner, the one right to the left of the negative, that'll start. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Learn something new.
So one slide back.
It's not like, it's not.
That's fine. That's perfect. Yeah. So,
Flushed out.
yeah. So, some of the treatment options here are blending. That is really rudimentary, right? So then you're taking 2 sources, one that may be PFAS free, one that may be elevated, and then combining those 2 in some fashion, so that you are below the MCL, the maximum contaminant level. So blending,
And blending, by the way, that's a technique that we use right now for arsenic.
Absolutely.
It's a simple, low cost way of achieving compliance if in fact you have a well that's just barely over, just somewhat over the limit, you can blend it with a well that's got lower than the limit and produce results that are satisfactory. So that's something the district's already doing.
Even at Calmetto, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the sanitary survey that we just had. But at Calmetto, we blend Calmetto for nitrate. So that's another example. So we're doing that in a couple locations already. So granulated activated carbon is something that the Mutual Water Company has found success with. They did some pilot studies at their wells in dealing with PFAS, because PFAS has been found just south of us. And some of these, we're not only right down the road, but a lot of what's flowing from Atascadero is kind of coming down through the Salinas corridor towards our wells as in addition. So granulated activated carbon is something that it's not only effective, but it's something that just to the south of us, they're selecting that as their go-to treatment type. Reverse osmosis has some byproducts that are not necessarily easy to deal with. The materials after the byproduct of reverse osmosis, all that concentrated material has to be sent someplace. And so then that's difficult to deal, to dispose of. And where does it go? And is your name on it for forever? There's a lot of things to work out there. Ion exchange was another one that I believe to the south was tested as well, but granulated activated carbon was selected in their pilot study as the go-to. Next slide, please. So new sampling requirements. We're going to be sampling these wells June through December. Hoping everything goes well. If we do have an elevated sample result, then the implications are ongoing monitoring, reporting requirements, treatment options, which I believe that we were going to include. We would be including regardless. It's something that would need to be explored even perhaps inside of our master plans and those sorts of things, if not already drafted. So we'll know as soon as June comes around if we end up having a result that exceeds the MCL. And so and there's funding sources out there for smaller water systems like ours in grants, but I don't know if there are always a lot of fluctuation with the funding. A lot of fluctuation with the funding.
Hold your breath on federal
Yeah.
funding.
Yeah. Well, and that's gonna come from down to the state too from them as well. So the funding thing seems to be a moving target of sorts, but anyways, if there's any questions about PFAS, I just wanted, if nothing else, just to update with that we are sampling. We're a part of this UCMR 5 in compliance with UCMR 5.
There hasn't been any sampling done in town previously. But you've heard that there are other nearby agencies that have tested positive for PFAS, and I think every time you read this, there's more and more agencies are getting hit with positive test results. So it's becoming a real common concern.
And the 4 is an arbitrary number. I know we do lead testing and they keep lowering the number of what you have to test to a place that's almost impossible to get to like the levels they want. And it's just somewhere's just making up numbers, I think. I mean, there might be some data behind it, but I would expect it might even go lower at some point.
Sure, yeah, it's changed over time already.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the technology probably a couple decades ago didn't even exist to test to this level, and now these days it's a requirement.
Yep. Interesting.
So. Yeah, we'll know more, we'll know more, but don't be shocked if it surfaces. I think Atascadero has it at many of their sites.
Yeah.
Now, their situation's a little different, even though generally the water, both the underlying groundwater and the under river flow comes, moves somewhat to the north. Certainly the river moves to the north here. The Atascadero's situation is a little differently. We have in Templeton, in our area where our wells are, there's a pretty good clay layer between the river flows and the deep wells. There's not much intermixing between those two water sources, and that's a very different circumstance in Atascadero, where they can actually see their deep wells recharged by shallow, percolation of water sources. So it's a little different set of circumstances.
Okay.
I'm unaware of any positive hits for a PFAS in Paso Robles.
When they say positive at the beginning, 4.5,
Well,
5,
more than 4.
more than 4.
Yeah, in their water system, I'm not sure. I know that their utilities director was saying that they were getting ready to start testing, and I haven't heard any results
Yeah.
from any feedback.
The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is you may have heard that there's some class action lawsuits between Mini, for 3M and DuPont, and we did not opt out of those. We haven't seen money, which we don't have any known PFAS yet, but in theory, there's some money coming through that if in fact we find ourselves testing positive or having contaminant levels higher than this number. Those class action lawsuits have continued. And again, we didn't opt out. If we had opted out, then we'd kind of be on our own to go after those manufacturers.
Simple enough.
I'm moving on to item number 4, review 2013 water wastewater master plan update.
Okay, so we want to provide to each of the committees this year a review of the current master plans the district has in all areas. For this committee, it's the water and wastewater master plan. The districts, and I think that it's a timely review because, as you'll see here just in a few minutes, we have another very related topic. The district's most recent master plan update for water and wastewater was adopted by the board in 2013. Work was done primarily in like 2011, 2012, and included in 2013. So we included a link to this. We don't plan to go through this in excruciating detail with you, but we're happy to kind of walk you through the components of it or answer questions about it, what it contains, etc.
Jeff, what, wasn't one of in developing the RFP for the current master plans, one of the considerations we had was going back to whatever wasn't completed in the past master plans and bringing those items into the new RFP?
Yeah, so that's right. The master plan, even when it was adopted, there was a little bit of I wasn't employed here during the bulk of its work. I came in June of 2013, and so this was nearly complete. The district had gone through a couple of different consultants, and the consultant that was hired to conduct the master plan was not the consultant who completed the master plan. There was some issues that had come about, and the district separated from that consultant and hired somebody else. Nonetheless, that led to some hiccups, I'll call it, in the adoption of this master plan. There was recognition that there was some additional data that should be accumulated over time. But the master plan itself, it's probably just worth just kind of highlighting what it contains. It does describe the district's infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, how it references, it has a bunch of reference materials. For example, we have this Templeton subunit study that Fugro had conducted. That's another consultant that the district has used for many years. Well field assessment, wastewater system evaluation. All of these were reference materials for the master plan. It also forecasted water and water demands at build out and wastewater flows at build out. You can see that right here in the executive summary. It forecasted shortages in water supply. And I think it's really interesting because the assumptions that were made at the time have really not proven to hold true. The district's water demands have dropped since this data was put together and have remained quite a bit lower than what this had forecast, even under the lower tier or lower demand. So there's discussions of supply and demand, et cetera. And then probably the stuff that I think is real valuable coming out of the master plan is the description of projects that are necessary to achieve or meet the planning horizon. And so there were a number of projects that were spelled out, and they were planned for both water and wastewater, near term and longer term. As you can see here, like $33 million worth of projects. Now, some of these projects have begun. One of which was the Integrated Water Resource Strategic Plan. That project began and is 2/3 complete. It's really like a dozen separate items. Wastewater treatment plant optimization. Even back then, it was noted as being complete, although we did another set of wastewater treatment changes following the implementation of the East Side Force Main. West Side Lift Station capacity reliability. We upgraded the West Side Lift Station as a part of the East Side Force Main project. Although I would expect you'll see that again we recognize that that's a bit of a bottleneck in our current system and a really important one. West Side Pressure Zone. This is something that didn't move forward, but was recommended to. Et cetera. And then you see some other projects that are listed here. The East Side Force Main project, or it's what's labeled East Side Force Main and Lift Station project that was completed in 2019.
Just real quick, it says that these are projects that are to be implemented in the next 2 years and they started in 2014, but you're saying the West Side Pressure Zone project did not start.
It did not start.
Why is it on the table saying it's gonna start too? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, it was the West Side Pressure Zone was a project or a request, I guess, of the community from decades ago. We have a single pressure zone for the water system in Templeton, which means the water tanks, the water system is 100% gravity fed from water tanks that sit at approximately the same level, same elevation. And so the higher lying areas, the higher elevation areas, particularly on the west side, have lower pressures. Where the
Sure.
vineyards development is, that kind of area there has lower static pressure. Like on a second story home, something like 25 to 30 pounds of 30 PSI pressure on the second floor.
Yeah.
At those locations.
I understand that. I guess obviously you had multiple consultants work on this. Is the plan to present this to a board for the approval to be implemented as the new master plan?
This is a decade-old, 12-year-old document that I'm
Okay.
showing you now.
But what,
So this is a list of projects and the point would be, okay, let's fund these projects. So the master plan defines the projects. You go forward, you get funding for them, and then you go forward with each project as you,
okay, so we're just.
you hire consultants for each one.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I guess I just misunderstood when it said master plan update. I just thought that there was.
Yeah, we're doing that next.
Okay.
So we have some.
Okay, so this is the pre-update
Yeah.
This is
version.
the
Okay.
2020.
This is from 12
Yeah,
years
you
ago.
know, and I get that now. I see it. I saw the update, so I thought you guys had already started the update process. We just did a whole update. So I understand now. That makes more sense. So.
Yeah, so anyway, these are the projects that were identified, many of which
Yeah.
have been.
I got you now.
Have been done, others have not.
Sure.
There are a number of projects in here that may or may not still be necessary. And there may be projects, I would anticipate there'd be new projects identified as a result of a new master planning effort.
Yeah, this is the prep for the,
This is the most recent, this is the one we have today.
I gotcha.
So, and you can see a lot of these things like, a lot of the projects are identified as, there's a number of pipeline projects in the water system. And it says implement when increased demands affect system pressures. Well, we haven't recognized that in this past decade, and there's some doubt that the modeling that was done to feed this master plan, we wanna have that work redone.
Yeah, so you guys are in the process or have issued an RFP for a consultant to come in and
That's,
update
the
this?
next item is the draft for the
Yeah.
park.
Okay, perfect.
So-
We have not
Getting
gone.
ahead of myself.
So page 34 and 43 shows the CIP priorities. So those are the ones that was identified through the old master plan on which prioritization.
33 and 34.
34 and 43.
In 2013.
And there was also some periodic updates for the previous district engineer on the status of
Okay.
these different projects, the last being in 2022, where we had like highest priority, ones that are kind of planning stage, and additional ones, which there's some staff reports as we go back that kind of speak to each one of these projects. So I was actually just speaking with Jeff before this about, maybe we boil it down to that table and say, this is what we got to, and this is what we haven't gotten to. But in summary, if we did not get to the project and it's still applicable, it will be rolled into the master plan effort and an updated CIP list. And so that CIP list will be, going from 5 years to 20 years and looking at prioritization, and then, also costs and helping us be able to budget in the next phase. And so, what I will say is that, in the system, when the East Side Force Main project came online in 2019, it pretty much changed everything in our system, for water and wastewater, because so much wastewater was rerouted to the wastewater treatment plant, and it increased our ability to infiltrate that water and then take the water up later in our wells, that a lot of the things that we modeled and a lot of our numbers are going to change and affect this, both on the water side and on the wastewater side. So even though this was a good snapshot in 2013 based on information that they collected up to 2012, the next effort will move to collect all the information that's happened in the last 10 years to give us an idea of where we need to focus moving forward in that effort. So I think that was the main point of kind of revisiting this, right, Jeff, that we wanted.
Well, it was twofold. We needed to review it so that we can incorporate whatever wasn't done into the new master plan RFP. And I was asked to make sure that we reviewed the status of these existing master plans with all of these committees. Sure. All the pertinent committees. So that's why it's on, those are the reasons why it's on your agenda. But yeah, it contains a number of water and wastewater projects and recommendations, and some have been complete and some have not for a number of reasons. The pressure zone really, because we haven't seen additional growth in the area of the west side that would benefit from the pressure zone. And most homeowners that have had water pressure concerns have resolved them. It's not uncommon in Templeton for property owners to have installed like a pressure booster system on their property to alleviate the low pressure. For example, I didn't install it, I had to replace it, but on my property, I have a booster pump because I sit on a little bit of a ridge, and when that booster pump is out, you get a very slow shower.
Yeah, I have that.
So
Okay, there we go.
these are just
Yeah.
priority A, B. These projects were put in priority total for both the water and wastewater system. So, yeah, we're happy to attempt to answer questions that you might have about what's contained in the master plan, the projects that are in them. whatever information you'd like. Since we plan on moving forward with a new master plan update for water and wastewater, assuming that occurs, I think our time is better spent talking about what we expect to be contained in the new master plan, particularly the RFP and how that process is going to work. Because I think there have been some really significant changes on both the water and wastewater system. On the water side, because we didn't spend money on the west side pressure zone and other things, we've put our resources more into increasing the district's supply as opposed to the infrastructure over the past decade. For example, in this past decade, we've increased our allocation of Nacimiento water from 250 acre feet to 406 to increase our supply to meet future needs. And we've put substantial effort into acquiring property to be able to, for the project that we call the Nacimiento Recharge Recovery Project out by Creekside, to be able to discharge that, to relocate the turnout, discharge water there, and retrieve it there in a more real-time fashion to improve our ability to meet demands going forward. So those are things that were not anticipated or expected. We had supply challenges, obviously, but those projects were not called out specifically in this master plan, and yet those have been where the efforts have been.
Yeah, the Nacimiento turnout relocation was started in like 2017, I believe.
That's when we bought the property, yeah.
Yeah, as soon as the property was acquired, there was this conversation of, could we have a better situation for accepting our Nacimiento water? And so that wasn't even in this last master plan effort. So there's a big conversation around that needs to be looked at.
But this contains a number of maps and other things that show the location of infrastructure. They're a little outdated at this point because they're, 12 years old, but this is the most recent comprehensive master plan for water and wastewater that we have. Here's the wastewater projects that were recommended.
So how close were we to the 5.3 on the east side?
What would that project cost?
Yeah.
I've purposely decided not to remember those details.
Did have grants, so there was like 2 grants that were part of that process as well.
Here's that list of the integrated water resource plan items list of projects that we were requested to do or enfolded. We've accomplished about 2/3 of these. The remaining ones are contained in the new RFP. They included things like define a supply demand ratio. This is more like that buffer policy, et cetera. So anyway, that's it. Some of the stuff is kind of redundant. This CIP list comes from I reviewed it at the executive summary. And then there's actually a list of projects, more detailed project descriptions for each of these items and a range of costs that are assigned, et cetera. So again, the costs were based on the cost at the time back in 2013. So, again, happy to go through whatever piece of information the committee would like, try to answer questions that you might have. This is the current, albeit 12-year-old master plan update.
Yeah, I would agree with your statement that it'd be better spent time looking at the RFP for the future plan, because obviously a lot of things have changed in 12 years. So I personally don't have any additional questions related to current.
Could move to item 5, discussion of draft RFP for water and wastewater master plan.
Super. So now that you know that we've got a 12-year-old master plan, and we've actually for a couple of years now have identified the need to update it, we have provided for you a draft of our request for proposals that we've been working on. Actually, it's been little pieces over time, but this is anticipated to be nearly ready to be issued, and we wanted to get feedback from you about its contents, and, et cetera. Lori's, put the bulk of the work in here, and again, we can go over this in as much detail, or as little detail as you'd like. But this is the document that would be made available to, consulting engineers who might be interested in assisting us with this effort. And we would be requesting proposals for them to do the work.
Just at a high level, I don't see any like baseline project schedule. Do you guys, going into this, obviously you want past performance, you want to understand what their abilities are. Do you have a timeline that you'd like to include in the proposal for the how long they have to execute the plan?
A good point. No, I mean, all of us are new to this process here and I don't know if Jeff has any idea of how long the last one took, but in my mind, it was kind of a year that I was figuring it would take. But that's a good point. I mean, we don't want it to go on forever, but there is a lot of information gathering,
Sure.
including staff time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that-
We
one of the-
try to make it too short, then
It
actually
might
burden.
overrun us.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the reason I bring it up is just like any RFP we deal with is putting some sort of, a year, look at the last time how it did. A year is really a good idea, but I also think, sometimes it's nice to have a sticks or some sort of like damages, like, hey, you guys have a year, but just like a construction project, hey, this took a little bit longer, that took a little bit longer. I don't know about RFPs when it comes to water, this is a little bit of a new game for me, but I know a lot about RFPs, I deal with it a lot. Is at least, even if it's like, okay, it took a year last time, give them 18 months, that's fine. But hey, for every day you're over, it's $100 a day and provide an incentive or some sort of tools that you have, because with no duration in the RFP or the contract, they could 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, there's nothing that stops them. So if it's like, hey, if you don't finish in 18 months, you owe us $100 per day or $1,000 per day or whatever that ends up being, what's some sort of damages, right? But
I haven't seen liquidated damages
yeah.
with master plan,
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on master plan RFPs, but just.
but the schedule is.
Yeah, I think having this, I was guessing this would be like a year to 18 months. It kind of depends on, there may be circumstances where they ask for information that we have a hard time finding. I will admit that we're having a hard time getting information out of the current existing consultants we work with. Like,
Yeah.
everyone is really stretched thin, and so getting information could take longer than it should. It's not an excuse, but it's just a reality of the situation.
Sure.
And it's more important, in my view, that this get done right than get done fast.
And I don't disagree with that, but you gotta give them.
Yeah,
some
I-
sort of
I
timeline,
think
Or at least say submit with your RFP, you're
a
expected.
project schedule.
baseline schedule,
And
yeah.
not be a part of the evaluation, because if they have better ability, with their team to get this thing done in a year,
So,
great. But if we only have like 2 people working on it and it takes them years, that's different. That's what we were kind of saying, offline without writing it in here, is that we want a team that will really go after this and not just kind of let it be pulled along.
yeah, and to that point, usually standards establishing some sort of point metrics is always a good way of doing it, like your schedule's worth 10 points and your project team is worth 20 points and your past performance is worth 20, creating a like almost a qualification matrix that you can, judge each type of applicant. Now, who knows, $150,000 or whatever your guys' budget is for an 18-month water plan, maybe you're gonna have a hard time finding people. I'm not sure what this world looks like. But I know that for your evaluation, creating a set of criteria might be a benefit, and then you can have a schedule within that, and then you include that data in the contract of whoever you select. So just a couple things around the RFP process that I'm familiar with. Again, I don't know how many of these companies out there exist. I'm not sure how much interest you'll get, or maybe you'll get a bunch of interest. And then I always, having a, qualification section, you guys have a brief one, but, maybe getting a little more detail on like what you're looking for on, the resumes of the personnel that'll be assigned to the project, the resumes of the company, and, a timeline and those type of things. I would recommend, so.
Yeah. Letting them know the points. I thought that was in here, but I'm not.
Yeah, we developed a little criteria, but I like adding the project schedule to as a weighted,
Yeah.
the whole.
Yeah.
Those are some subscribe.
We haven't had very successful luck with consultants recently, so.
Well,
I guess I would also like to see something in there that what happens if their major project team gets a better job, goes away, then
Yeah.
what's gonna happen? Cause that could really throw
Yeah.
things behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at this project approach list and it does have schedule as one of them, but, the project team, cause the selection process is really gonna be tied to the team and what they've done in the past, and we really want local, kind of examples of, or similar size water system, to ours, examples, and so if those people that did end up leaving, then we're kind of in a situation, right? So it is a little bit of a risk that we have to take.
there is a risk. The district standard consulting service agreement has an ability to terminate the agreement. So I can give you a couple of examples of when that's been done in the past. The East Side Forceman is one such project. The district hired a big engineering company called AECom.
I know who AE.
And a very qualified firm to design that project, and the team of designers that was with AECom, one by one left AECom. And so because of that, the district decided to terminate the contract and start over with a new consulting firm that had happened to hire all the people who were working on the project in order to have continuity with the individuals. And so that kind of opportunity that exists through our consulting services agreement. We're not bound to see it through, but the goal is to see it through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens. Look, I've bid jobs where we bid a federal government job and we put our best guys on the resume. We're gonna do it. And then they award the job a year later. It's like, well, those people, they're not just sitting around waiting. So I totally understand that's always a risk. Something just like from a tech, a clerical point, like, establishing an RFI or request for information section and due dates to those, like, hey, we're gonna release this RFP on the 1st of March. And then you guys have 2 weeks to submit your questions, and then we have a week to answer. So creating like an RFP timeline within this, and I'm just going over this high level, you guys, you might have that in your. Yeah,
Keep going.
absolutely.
We have that.
So,
And back to the team as well, I wanted to point out, when we get these proposals and we're going through that criteria that we have and ranking these proposals, looking at the team assigned, who's going to be a part of the team, this master plan with the consultants? How many staff, what are their level of qualifications? If one leaves the team, do they have somebody that can fill in that void in time of need? So having a robust team with these professional services that can help us, whoever we're gonna select, if we lose one of those staff, can somebody else kind of fit that void?
yeah, and addressing those concerns, and then like, do you guys wanna do an interview process, right? Like, yeah, they respond to the document maybe, and this would, let's say you get 10 people to respond, which I'm not sure you're gonna get, but maybe you select the top 3 and you do interviews with those as
Yeah.
well, and that could be part of your performance metrics. Just, do you like them, right? So that's great on paper. Trust me, we've been trying to hire lots of people for our company. It's really challenging right now in the construction industry. We have people on paper are top notch, but then you have a conversation with them. And you're like,
Yeah.
how did you
Good
get to
point,
where
yeah.
you're at? Do you wanna, are these people that you wanna even deal with? So just a suggestion from a more, when it comes to the data inside there, I'm not a water expert by any stretch of the imagination. I've only lived in Templeton a few years. I don't know all your well and things like that. So I'm learning all those things, but I think there's just a handful of things that you guys could include into here that would just refine the information you get and help you guys make a better decision on who you're gonna use. And then I always think that you gotta put some end date. You have a schedule, but you gotta, and I agree with you, but if there's no end date.
Yeah, we don't wanna drug on and on and on.
Yeah, maybe
Exactly.
say like we wanna schedule what anticipated wouldn't be no longer than 18 months, 2 years,
And-
whatever we.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want it to be longer than 18 months, and maybe reasons why it needs to, but I don't, that's dragging it on. I mean, I think what we've seen, like say in the Everest Park projects, we've had these lulls, and then it's really hard to pick it back up again after you're Nothing's
We
happening.
need tools for you from a contract perspective that allows you to, I know with master plans, again, liquidated damages, maybe there's nothing like that, but maybe there's some sort of tool you can include in here that if they're not meeting the requirements set out, that you have some sort of, obviously you could fire them and find someone else, but that costs a lot of money to go down that process. It's better to, you know, and again, do you really want to take them to court for money? No, no one ever, no, only the lawyers win when you do that. But to that point, those are just some of the high level recommendations that I would see just off the bat. I think of metrics for evaluating performance too.
Oh, yeah.
Price is a big part, schedule, team, personal people, qualifications, company qualifications, you know, maybe like we do with standards, safety and things of that nature. So anyway, I think it's an overall like a good base, but just getting some more in there to help protect the district and provide structure to how you guys want them to operate, you know, maybe you think of your own milestones. Within the first 3 months, we want you guys to visit each site. Within the first 6 months, we want you to have done, you know, X, and within the first year, you need to provide your first draft deliverable within the first, and establishing a milestone timeline, that might also be beneficial. Just given some milestones that you'd like to look at.
Yeah, all good points. You know, as far as the timeline, ultimately to conclude the master plan and accomplish it, there's gonna be a number of items that aren't finished. There always is things, there's more data, there's flow meters that need to be set up inside of systems. And it
There's a
takes time.
schedule.
There could be due to the lack of rain in the winter time, you don't have good peak, you know, wet weather flows, and that's something to take when you're dealing with I and those sorts of things. You know, could be a factor that then later you conclude the master plan, you still conclude, you finish it off, it's done, and you move forward in the next fiscal year with a proposal, you know, to move forward with an I project or flow meter. So there's probably going to be a number of projects that come of the master plan that you weren't necessarily able to finish off during the master plan.
Sure.
And so then, but you can call it a day and kind of.
Yeah, there'll have to be a
move on.
point when it's like, okay, we have what we have, we need to
Yeah, I mean,
finish
you
the
can,
document.
everything's always changing all the time, so this
Yeah.
this kind of
It's like a
master plans
planning, it's a
can't
planning
be
level
living
document.
documents, it's
Yeah.
gotta be a finite document with a finite, and I did see something in here. This has got a little AI thing, so I ask it stuff and sometimes it doesn't. I'm like, is there a schedule thing in here? And it said no, but then I found it, you know, AI. No, I just typed in, what are some additional items?
Well, I guess the question
Pops out a bunch
for-
of things and.
For this committee is, would you guys be interested in interviewing and being a part of the interview, or would you want staff?
Or scoring, or
Or in that scoring of the RFP, we're figuring that we have to go to the board with a recommendation of that final selection, but to bring the top three, you mentioned top three to this committee and have an analysis there, or possibly even bring them in for interviews.
we don't know how many proposals we will receive, so, but.
That might be
we
top
could-
two.
We have used committees in the past to help us finalize a recommendation. you
I
know.
would be happy to help you guys out if you guys wanted my help to just sit and ask some questions and see, you know, are they gonna step up and do what's best for at the end of the day, it's all about what's the best for the community of Templeton, right? And who's gonna achieve to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve, so.
Yes, there would be a little bit of work of looking at their proposal ahead of time, ahead of the meeting, and then we probably have like 30-minute slots where we zoom them in, depending, or if they're local, they could come in.
It's not it's not a huge thing. Have you guys also reached out to Paso and Atascadero and surrounding neighbors to, you know, maybe help solicit some people that they've used in the past as well?
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
I don't know what your process is, but I'm guessing, you know, the more people that look at it and provide a proposal, the better it is for everybody. You want to get at least 3 bids for anything you do, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
the plan to
Yes.
post it in all the normal places, which Justin's a little more up on that, because we haven't done huge projects since the Eastside Force Meeting, so, yeah, getting on the right boards to get the right people. We already have one of the companies we worked with on a lot of our planning level stuff. MKN is already aware that it's coming. They've done our wastewater modeling and our water system modeling.
Sure.
So they're expecting this. So we at least have one that we pretty sure.
Yeah,
you know, where it's,
the interview's great because you can express those concerns of challenges you had in the past. That's a little harder to communicate through the document itself. Like, hey, in the past, we had to switch people, we had to do this, people went away, like, make us feel warm and fuzzy about how you guys are gonna tackle this thing. So, but I mean, without getting too farther in it, we could spend, we could spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours talking about RFPs. So I think just from a high level, those are the things I would recommend.
yeah. So from the other committee members, do any of you have feelings either way, if you would want to be
I'm in
involved?
agreement with the idea of, for this committee to essentially evaluate what is being proposed. Not all, proposals, but wean it down to your top 3, whatnot, pros and cons, then have a discussion about, what are the positive next to it, possibly get those interviews going remotely.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's something that's what this committee is for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, the committee's willing to help finalize the recommendation of the board about who to select.
Absolutely.
And we'll work out the details once we have the proposals. Maybe there's only 1 or 2 that are good. Maybe there's 4, we don't, it's kind of hard to have a magic number.
And maybe you guys tune in up on your RFP and we have a quick, committee meeting just to finalize some language in the RFP. I'm not saying we have to do that, but just something else to think about. I'm only on one committee now, so I got a little bit more time to do that, so.
Time to help
Yeah.
dial it in.
Are there specifics other than what's been talked about in the RFP that the committee members want to see changed or in there?
I would have to do a lot more reading. Other additional specifics.
Yeah, we might wanna just, go to the scope of work and we can give them a brief overview of what we've included and some things that maybe have come up in the last year or so, and Justin had 1 or 2 that we might actually be adding. So if you wanna scroll down, that's just kind of standard language about this scope of work. We'd want, obviously, meetings, and they would be kind of heading up the effort, so they would have, all the meeting agendas and minutes, and a lot of these people, they do these things all the time. We've only done this, every 10, 15 years, so they're gonna be bringing that and, information to us. It's like, what do we need to provide to them to have this quality master plan come out of it? So we've listed in this task 2, which the task 1 was project management. Task 2 is general planning. We want them to basically do a whole overview of our facilities history, get understanding of what all our sources of water and wastewater network, all of it. And we're gonna be, as a part of this effort, providing all of this historic information to them and all of the previous reports and more recent modeling and whatnot that's we have undergone. And then we'll also ask them to even look at stuff like land use, how that's changed in the last 10 years of population. In the previous plan, it's basically said Templeton's only gonna get to like 9,000 people. Well, we're already at over 8,000 in district boundaries, because Templeton is slightly larger as defined by the census, but our district boundaries are slightly smaller, so there's gonna be a process of defining growth within our district boundaries, our current boundaries, and then if we were even to annex some property, as part of
And
the
our, like
county
our water system,
annexation.
it goes beyond the district boundaries as well, so there's a little complexity there.
Right, so that there's that complexity, and really, was 9,000 really realistic? Are we looking at more like 12,000? That would be a significant change. So there's those things that we want them to give us input on. We want them, on the wastewater side, to analyze the wastewater treatment plant site in the courtyard. We haven't looked at some things out there for things like backup power. We actually currently do not have backup power at the wastewater treatment plant. Solar, and then there's electric charging requirements that have come down. Is it state level?
Yes.
State, yeah.
I think if it was at the federal level, they're no longer, but state level requirements and really where those are going. So hopefully these folks have some information on where that stuff is going and when and if we need facilities for that. Any modification of our current buildings, so we have our wastewater treatment plant, office, but also our parks guys are out there. It's already been identified that they need like a changing area, kind of locker room, clean room. And we currently don't have that. So there's just things like that where we're adding that into this planning effort. So it's not just looking at water, wastewater, you know, and our networks that we're looking at as we grow and as there's, you know, as we continue in the future, what are our needs? So it's quite a big effort.
Facility and capital projects improvement
Yeah.
related to wastewater. I mean, that's at least identifying some of the conditions of what's there and what needs to be considered when it comes to like the meeting all the requirements for each building that actually serves these
Right.
things. So that's like a whole nother.
Yeah, and
And
then
that might
in
not be the same
connection,
company.
and also talk about staffing, so as we grow as a
Yeah.
community, how many more staff would we potentially need? Does engineering need to have more than just a district engineer and a part-time support? Does utilities need 3 additional, you know, these kind of things would be kind of brought into that, and when we start looking at, you know, the funding aspects and the CIP projects as a part of it, it all plays into later how we actually look at our rates and development fees. So all this is kind of feeding into an overall effort to see, you know, where we need to put our efforts. So Jeff, if you want to keep scrolling, there's
Do
I
you
think
guys,
we can then go into water and water and detail there with just water systems.
Do you know if these type of consultants, are also the same kind of consultants that like would be your advocate for when you were gonna go put out a bid to go build? You know, sure, they can help with the master plan update. Is that the same consultant that wouldn't necessarily engineer a project, but maybe could be a consultant as an owner's representative to help you select and build, you know, new treatment plants or new, whatever the new thing is, because they were part of the master plan. They're the mastermind, right? Well, they've created that. Are they gonna be maybe someone that's a, you know, we like to use collaborative and strategic partners, right? What you're looking for is, because we're such a small district, and I'm not an expert in this, I don't know specifically what this consultant would do, but you want someone who's gonna help guide us in that. So I'd just be curious if you guys knew if this type of consultant would be the same kind of consultant that would, you know, advise you down the road on when you went to build things or do capital project improvements or things of that nature. And if you could find one that maybe as an alternative that gives you an extra 5 points, a company that can help advise on future things, right? Because maybe you find someone that helps with the immediate, but also can help you with the long term, right? And you can do additional contracts extensions or additional new contracts on a case by case basis for future projects.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing that comes out of these master plans is the modeling of our systems. And so it's like, you know, the absolute thing we do need, regardless if we continue with them, is that information. You know, we want the modeling so that if there's a need to upgrade that or change that,
When you say-
we have that. So, but having a continued relationship with them and they would be able to upgrade models and help, you know, help us understand how certain changes and certain things would happen would be helpful. But, you know, at the end, usually at the end of this effort is kind of, there's a conclusion point, and then there would be, you know, follow-up projects where we could potentially, you know.
Hello.
Okay. Going on this desk, going on.
Oh, thank you very much.
Happy evening.
Conscious talking to me.
I think oftentimes, entities reach back out to those consultants. You develop a close relationship.
That's what you're looking for.
Long project like this, and they're very involved.
Yeah.
You know, and there's all those site visits and the condition assessments going through and with your staff, looking at wells, looking at lift stations, taking all the data in for the wastewater treatment plant, trying to look at meeting the new general permit requirements into the future. I mean, it's just, these things are complex.
Oh, yeah.
Very involved, and so then you build a relationship that you're going to probably draw on later later as you go, you're gonna connect back with those folks and you're on to another project, you're looking at to refreshing something, it's something model related, it's, you know, absolutely. You would be,
And the real issue is there's value there because it's gonna be less expensive for them to advise us than going to somebody new because they've got all this background information that another consultant doesn't have to learn from the beginning. And so, it would be likely that in an ideal arrangement, you'd end up with a relationship that you could lean on in the future.
Well, yeah, I think the selection is really critical in that. When you say model, is there like a 3D model that they're making of your existing infrastructure? Okay, and then, all right, yeah.
Yeah, there's,
Do you have any sort of
we have, like I
standards for
mentioned
that?
here, we have a hydraulic model with, that MPN has created for us in WaterCAD, so it's a CAD-based program that actually, you know, you can model flows. And it has, you know, it's like the whole deal where you're, you know, if we empty the water Lincoln tank, what would happen to the system? You can kind of model these situations.
Yeah, I would be.
And so they have to be able to, you know, have a good handle on those programs. So specifically, we're looking for somebody who knows WaterCAD and SewerCAD.
Is that the
Is that
current
the-
standard?
That's what I believe is. I don't know if there's any other ones, that are up there in the industry, but yeah, I think WaterCAD, SewerCAD are. They're all spin-offs of, you know, AutoCAD, which have for years and years been the highest standard.
But everyone's going to Revit now and BIM type modeling stuff, so I would suggest as a part of your exercise, figure out exactly who the top technology and the top people are, what they're using, and then build that into the RFP. I mean, you have something in here, and it might still be that, but also just, you're gonna look at our existing files and provide us the newest, latest, greatest, best version of what you got, you know?
Well, yes and no, because within reason, if they're gonna have to redo a model and we've already spent, you know,
Sure.
expended funds to have it to be done in these programs, it might not make financial sense. So you gotta have that kind of balance of finding the people that can get you what you need in terms of these, you know, information, without us having spent, you know, $500,000 in
Yeah,
their
well,
modeling efforts. So just
it's
finding
a-
that, we want the latest and greatest, but we also want the accuracy of giving us what we need, in terms of, you know, accurately modeling the systems and, giving us, you know.
we did just update the water, wastewater hydraulic models. And that was to provide that information to the selected consultant in the master plan. So we just spent, you know, last 18 months or so updating both of those. A lot of these things, then the consultant's going to go through the model, they're gonna calibrate everything. There may be some finishing up, they're gonna go through the model and identify any bottlenecks, any deficiencies. And so, absolutely, if they have a recommendation moving forward to use a different
They say
software
it's
program.
terrible, we can't use it, then we have that conversation.
Or they can import it into a newer version.
Well, that's pretty, like, if, like, a lot of time you can, you know, it's challenging, but you can take older CAD things and create new models they're getting pretty good at doing that convert. But I think I've said enough on this. I think you guys have a.
Yeah, and I think there's always things that we don't know, right? So
That's why you're looking for
we're
the
the ones,
part.
we're like the operators, we're the ones that are in the day-to-day, but they're in the planning world. And so they have the ability to speak to new and improved, you know, like you were talking about AI just a minute ago, like how could we use AI?
Yeah, they do these they have a lot of experience. We're hoping to select somebody with a lot of experience in master plan updates. And so we've maybe been a part of a few and maybe our RFP is drafted after several. We have a lot of different entities that maybe all are part of this RFP that's before you, up on the screen right now. And so, but
Might even be worth finding a vendor to help draft the best RFP, and now that might be going a step too far, but just, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we actually used to, had worked with another consultant to help us prepare this a couple years ago when it was in an earlier form.
yeah,
Cool.
that was kind of the starting.
yeah, and I believe.
Any other feedback on the RFP? So we've got some notes of things that have come up that we can incorporate in it. And then our goal would be to turn this around and get this out this month, within a month-ish, you know? So,
Well, and there may, when these folks, when they provide their proposals, they may identify things, that we haven't necessarily, you know, in some areas, we're pretty specific, but they may get into it. And then, so to this point, I was talking, I think on Friday, about, I don't have a particular item in here for the SCADA system. The SCADA system should be reviewed. There should be an evaluation.
we should add that, we should add that, evaluate and make recommendations.
I mentioned, the staffing, and so then we make a mention in here about staffing the facilities to be able to take care of our employees with a proper changing room, when dealing with chemicals, and just at the end of the day, those are.
Decontamination.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we mentioned that, but I was remembering looking at certification requirements, classifications of our water and wastewater systems, the number, an evaluation and recommendations for the staff, number of staff to be able to operate those types of, facilities, the quantity, the size, the flow. Sometimes you bring in, you know, the flow of these systems. Anyways, so that was another one, was evaluation of a staffing evaluation along with the SCADA system. This SCADA system, some of those components are antiquated. They're no longer backed by the manufacturer. And so we need to, that'd be another one. Ultimately, we're putting these things together as part of a 5-10 year CIP, possibly even longer range. And that means everything to our budgeting and future rate studies and those sorts, you know, those sorts of things. So that CIP can be pricey.
I got two more things that touched on. One, I actually worked at Lemoore Naval Air Station and did a project where we upgraded the entire SCADA system for the water treatment plant. And when we finished with that, it significantly increased the quality. Oh, that was a challenging job because we had to keep it online and we had to like run temp wires. It was a very challenging project. So I definitely think putting something in the SCADA, and then when you're creating your point matrix, maybe you put something in there or define something that's, or you can get 10 points or 15 or whatever extra points if you help identify additional items that aren't even in this. So maybe some sort of incentive for selection by helping us figure out things that we don't even know about. So I'm always trying to incentivize people to help.
I don't know.
You want
if
a
we-
partner,
I don't
right?
know if we put a point system. That's a great idea,
Yeah,
because
we
there
haven't
was,
done points.
there was a placeholder for if you come up with additional items that maybe we didn't capture here, please list them out. Let's have a conversation. Let's
Yeah.
recognize.
But if it's not a lot of time you'll get people that'll only want to do the bare minimum of what the RFP says.
Yeah.
And if there's a way for them to get points that'll help them get selected, it might incentivize them to do it. So, yeah, I think those are the only last couple items that I think of. Obviously, you could forever tune RFPs and it'll never meet everything you want, but you just do the best you can, so.
Yeah.
Well, I have confidence in Lori and Justin's.
Beautiful.
They will come through.
Yeah, I mean, but I think
And
both of us are honest that this, you know, we don't know everything there is to know about water, wastewater planning. And we need somebody that's gonna bring that value, right? So that's the whole point, is wanting, you know, as many people as possible involved in the process to picking the best candidate for this, and working with us through the process. And obviously, I mean, there's kind of pros and cons, like some of the bigger firms aren't in this county.
Yeah, when we're a
So they
small
would
agency,
possibly
we're a small
not be
budget, so we're not gonna attract,
But then some of the
not gonna get a dozen proposals.
Yeah, some of the smaller firms, they're closer by, so they're local, MKN, they're in slow. So there's these kind of other things of like, how much weight do we put on somebody being local and be able to come here, you know, take them and meet an hour. Or, you know, stuff like that versus, you know, having the big guys who do a lot of this work. They're from out of the area, then coming in and it being a little less available to us. So, you
It's
know,
a fine
there's,
balance for sure. And I've definitely bid RFPs that you have to either had a local office within 50 miles or 100 miles, or you had to be, you know, there's definitely times I've seen RFP that have metrics is
I would
way
say within
better.
100 miles at least.
Yeah, but maybe, but LA, you might, I mean, LA is only, 3-4 hours away, and that, to be honest, is not that far for a company. Now, this is kind of a smaller RFP, but,
For a
you know,
planning level.
but you're not you're not, I mean, you're doing investigations, but you're not really executing a ton of work. It's more of a clerical type document, you do the first initial stuff. So anyway, I think you guys have a lot of different tools in your toolbox to help you. And I think getting more people involved, not only it helps takes the load just off you guys and making a decision, right? Because you guys make a decision, you just hope it is. If you have 5 people make a decision with you, that, that helps, like, okay, we all made this decision together, and, validates some of the thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll take this input and we'll come up with another draft. You did mention wanting to have another look at it
Well, I'm
As-
just volunteering that. I don't know if that's
as
something
a
you-
group.
Is that
How-
something the committee would I do, or do you think you can, we can take the input we have and freshen the document up and get it released? Knowing that you're gonna have a role in the selection of the proposer.
I'm happy either way, but
I don't know, I kind of think
RFP,
yeah. I mean, if you can work it in the schedule, I mean. If
We
we're
just have to
gonna-
have- we just have to
if it's
schedule
gonna
another
take us
committee
month or two to do that, I would say no, but I personally.
No, I think
don't
it'd be a
like
quick turnaround, but just thinking
Yeah,
about having
if
to
it fits
schedule
into your schedule, I think it'd be well worth.
And I can do some
Look at it
research.
again.
maybe in a month.
I'm really looking to get a realistic master plan. I've been disappointed well, I was disappointed in the fire departments, for obvious reasons, but, and then I'm glad that I had you print this off, because I got a chance to look at the 2013, and of course, looking at it now, there's some things in here that I don't consider realistic, like a water treatment plant for $8 million. I know the story behind that, but, to me, that was not realistic. It's not realistic now. So, I mean, I would just take another look at it.
okay,
If we
well,
have to schedule a special meeting,
it's just a committee meeting, we'll update the draft, and as soon as we think we're gonna have that ready, we'll reach out to you to get another meeting scheduled. And, it could be kind of a shorter, potentially shorter meeting.
yeah, well, we'll just have that one topic. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and at that point, I think we could even get to the point of like trying to figure out the percentages of each.
Yeah, the scoring
The scoring. And then
criteria,
we can say,
maybe.
yeah, we like that. We like
We
this.
can even establish interview dates and everything else and include it in the thing, so we know, people know right from the beginning.
yeah, you have a whole bid schedule, right? Initial RFP release, RFI questions, maybe even if people want to do site visits. I'm not sure if it makes sense here, but.
Well, there is a allowance for 1 hour meeting with us, and we kind of took it from a different organization that said no site visits were included in that, but that hour, we could be open to having them ask for, a tour.
Sure.
Rather than it being like a sit down in a meeting, we could just say, okay, I will give you a tour of this system and open that up, or say they can have an hour meeting plus the tour. It just depends on how much.
Yeah, it's how much time you want to invest, but I think with this, because it's going to be such a important document for this community moving forward. And the thing I found with site visits too, like we do construction, but you get to have more personal conversations that are a little more authentic. And you can really start getting a feel for the type of companies, who's really invested, who's going to be invested in our success, who's going to be that. And again, I don't know if it makes sense for this type of particular document. I'm also in interim, I'm gonna go do some research on different RFP documents for this type of thing, just to see if there's anything else we could think of, so.
Okay, well, then we'll circle, we'll look to make these improvements over the course of the next couple of weeks and get another meeting scheduled here in a few weeks' time. And then look to get this released in early March, that works.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would just say the only thing with checking in one more time is that it just would slow down the ability to release the RFP for a couple of weeks, so that is.
Hopefully we can get a meeting,
So
scheduled.
the sooner the better, I would say, just because we wanna get this process going, for various reasons, needs that have come up that
Well,
we.
we could schedule a meeting now. As long as we could fulfill, as long as we could.
Would
produce
2
it.
weeks be too soon?
Can you do it too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a ton.
So like 2 weeks from today is the 19th.
I'm available in the afternoon, the 19th.
You're not available.
I'm only gonna be available typically in the afternoons. I work down in Arroyo Grande, so. But the 19th, I mean, pretty much the afternoons, 19th, 20th, 21st, I can make any of those days work.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah, I can,
Okay.
in the afternoons.
Lori, is 2 weeks enough time to, so then, I mean, in order to make this worthwhile, we'd have to get this to them in advance. And then you'll need to.
I mean, you might wanna
Yeah.
just send it to us, let us look at it, and then when we have the meeting.
Yeah, there you
No,
go.
we'll get it to you for sure in advance, so it's worthwhile, but,
So it won't be like a week ahead, it'll be like a couple days ahead.
well,
So if we're gonna meet Wednesday, 2 weeks, I'll.
you need to have it to them by like the 13th.
Monday, the Monday.
Monday's a holiday, so,
Oh, it's a holiday that week.
yeah, so that's what I mean, if we wanna set a
Or
date,
the-
What
So the
holiday?
Friday before.
yeah, that's Valentine's Day. The 13th is your last work day before then,
Yeah, cause I'm out.
so it's a week from tomorrow. Can we have this done by then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so does the 19th work? Can we just, you wanna just pencil that in? Same time, 3 o'clock, 19th?
I mean,
Looks all right to me.
That works fine for me.
if we're okay with the basic structure.
I'll send out a calendar invite
Yep.
after we get out of here.
Thank you.
All right.
Super. Anything else on this topic?
You're right.
You ready to move on to item 6?
Accidentally invited you guys to so ignore that. I was just adding a reminder, but it put them in there for you, so I apologize. You can ignore that.
On to item number 6, 2024 Department of Drinking Water
Oh,
Sanitation.
actually, we have a-
Inspection.
So I included, just before we get into the presentation, I accidentally opened up this link, I included this very detailed report as a link to all of you. But Justin's prepared a brief summary, so I don't have to go through this report in detail.
So PFAS.
You know all
I'm
that.
done with that.
Kidding.
Yeah, I see.
I'll try and make it quick. I know.
Yeah, 3 to 5 was the
Yeah.
thing here.
Well, okay, so sanitary survey 2024. In November, we had staff from the Division of Drinking Water. They're out of Carpinteria. Come up here and we scheduled site visits with our staff and them. Go around through our wells, our storage facilities, tanks. You know, looking at those facilities, they're looking for any deficiencies, they're looking at anything that, is of issue. Something that needs either maintenance or needs a repair of some kind. And so looking at the distribution, in addition to those facilities, are also looking just in general at the distribution system at large, routine monitoring and reporting requirements. So our staff are collecting data from our well sites on a daily basis. And so that information comes into our office and we're putting that information together and producing reports to the water board. Along the way, we're doing samplings and the results of those samplings are also being sent on a monthly basis to the Division of Drinking Water. So we send the Division of Drinking Water reports on a monthly basis for a number of sites. Next slide. So they, as a part of this inspection report, they noted 5 action items, if you will. They wanted to know in writing from us. They wanted us to provide a response to the next 5 items. The first 3 you'll see on this slide. Number 1 was dealing with a longer range plan with Calmetto and Platts 4. Both of which have suffered, have incurred some issues. So Calmetto's pump has failed and it just needs to be repowered. Platts 4 is, we were talking about this earlier, is, we're just kicking off a rehabilitation of the well. And in a short period of time, we're supposed to be able to, we're supposed to be provided identify whether or not Platts 4 is going to be rehabable, if it's something that we're gonna be successful with in its current place, if we're gonna be able to rehab it, or if we're gonna have to drill an altogether different Platts 4 well. And so they want to know, are you going to, what are your plans with Calmetto and Platts 4? And we want that now, instead of, you have instead of having the next 1 or 2 years to develop that plan, we want some response plan from you right now. With Silva, they went back. I should explain that in the DDW, we have certain staff from the division that are assigned to us. They rotate those staff on a regular basis. So we have a new staff that's over to Templeton now. That staff went back to some results in 2019 that had elevated radiological constituents for Silva well. And so they, in this sanitary survey, they're asking for a response to go out to Silva and collect certain samples. Number 3 of these action items had to do with iron color turbidity at Creekside Well and Fort Teeny. And so they were looking to see those constituents sampled again and regular, I would say, more consistent results for those constituents at those particular sites as well. If we can go to the next slide, Jeff. Number 4 is talking about bacteriological samples at our wells. And so we take coliform samples through the distribution system and at our wells. Something new is to take coliform samples and provide results at wells that aren't even running, they're not operating. And so you all know during the winter time, we're primarily operating 2 wells. Something they want to see from now on is us start up wells that are not operating and collect samples at those sites and report if they positive for coliform. Number 5 is just to take a photo, provide documentation that Platts 2 that has failed. That's a well, a shallow well down by Platts 4. And that well, it was noted in the past that had failed. It's inactive, but just the physical disconnection has happened. So Jeff, if you could, the next slide, please. And so, man, it feels like we, okay. So then, we explained to the DDW that we would be reevaluating Calmetto once Platts 4 is fully operational. And that is if it's gonna be cut our losses and drill a whole new well, then we may be looking to repower Calmetto. Calmetto, we talked a moment ago about it being having nitrate, high nitrate. And so it's a site that is more complex to operate. We have to blend it with several other wells, and there's a whole plan there's a notification, there's a whole lot of responsibilities that we have to follow through when we start up Calmetto. And so we didn't want to just rush out there and spend the money on repowering Calmetto if it's not needed. So much of what happens, the success we have with Platts 4 dictates what we're going to be doing with Calmetto in the near future. We hope to have by, I think, March, through March, have an update from our consultant and our contractor in Platts 4's its potential its rehab success. And so that was noted, and they expect a response sometime in, let's say, April. The DDW will be provided yet again another update in plats 4 and the successes, hopefully with its rehab. Silva, so they received, the DDW, we went out and we sampled gross alpha, total combined uranium, radium 226, radium 228, all by January 30th, when I sent this response back to them, and that we have followed through and sampled everything needed. It's involved. It's not something that you can just go out and take a sample. All these wells are off, and so it takes days of flushing, staff going around and taking, flushing, starting the well up, flushing it for sometimes for days, working these facilities before we take a sample. And so these constituents were ran first on survey. So there was a number of days that we flushed, and then we sampled, and then we ran the constituents off to laboratory analysis. It came back all well below the MCL. So across the board with all of these samples, everything is below the MCL, well below the MCL. So we noted everything's been sampled for at Silva. We're awaiting those results. They're provided those results straight away from the lab too, I should note. So we report, but the laboratory is required to update as well. Creekside Deep 14 survey results indicated lower than the MCLs as well. And so that was turbidity, color, that was iron. All of those constituents were below the MCL.
That one that's been active recently?
So they were shut off in the beginning of November.
Oh, so you had to start at 14.
So we had to start all of these wells back up again. Because during wintertime, we're just running on Smith and Creekside for the most part. Creekside River, shallow wells. So number 4 on that item, increased sampling at the active seven wells for bacteria. We just sampled, and so this is what we're gonna have to do ongoing on a quarterly basis, regardless if the wells are operational or not. And so I was just telling you, we've got 2 wells that are running right now. That means starting up the 5 that are off and starting to flush them and taking samples and sending them off to the lab. So it's staff time,
It's not just staff time, it's use of water
use
that is not beneficial.
Yeah.
Other than for reporting purposes.
And they wanna do this a lot more regularly, like on
Quarterly.
a quarterly basis, so you gotta fire up all of them quarterly, and there's no document or procedure, like just like you non-op your car, like obviously you need to turn on wells where you need to turn on wells, but there's no way to maybe say, hey, we really don't need to run these wells, but maybe not even for the whole year, and like I would hope there was some way
That would be nice to have in
to do that, but I'm just curious.
The old coliform rule, it said that you could, you only had to sample your active wells. And so now we're just underneath new requirements that dictate,
So
even
did we,
not- yeah.
I have a question on that particular one. Did you push back with the person that wrote the letter on this and asked, what is the frequency? Did he give you a number? And then you said, push it back. Is there any way to push back that quarterly number and say, can we do this twice a year?
It's the TCR.
Or is it
coliform
actually
rule.
some sort of state level requirement that he's now enforcing?
Yeah, so it's a coliform, the TCR, so the total coliform rule of 2023 requires quarterly sampling of all wells, regardless if they're operational or not. Even though our 2023 permit at the time was drafted saying only operational wells would have to be sampled, our new contact in the Division of Drinking Water is requiring all of the active wells, all 7 if they're operational, regardless if they're operational or not, to be sampled for bacteria.
What's the name, you call it what's it called?
Yeah.
Coliform?
TCR, so total coliform rule.
All right.
And so, out of the 7 wells, is there any well that we haven't used in a significant amount of time that we would consider taking off the active?
Well,
wells?
yeah, it has to go to standby, and that really means there's a process. These aren't standby wells. They're intended to be used. They're not emergency wells. It's just because our system is really unique in that we have, our winter demand exceeds the amount of permit water that we have available, plus the amount of Nasi and Selby water we have available. So we're trying to retrieve that for operational purposes. So we don't lose it, because otherwise it's essentially lost. So it's really some unique circumstances that we have that other water systems don't face. That causes us to not need to pump these deep wells for 6, 8 months at a time.
And we validate that this guy's just not saying it because he likes it and it's actually what the rule does say.
Yeah, we pulled
Okay,
the,
because sometimes those guys will like to tell you they
code.
want it and it's not actually what the rule says, you know, it's what their ego says or whatever it is.
Yeah, so the TCR rule for active wells, those that are on our list with DDW as being active, right? So the ones that we want the option to turn on in the case. So I guess that was my just kind of follow-up question. Do all those 7 need to be considered active? We haven't used them.
yeah,
Or if, say you're talking about Palmetto,
Calmetto's.
like Palmetto would be
Yeah.
one, where I'm like,
Quarterly
is that,
loss.
we already know it
Palmetto's-
has nitrate issues.
No,
We already,
Calmetto's a standby.
oh, okay, so Palmetto isn't in that setting, okay.
But these are wells that we intend on using in May and June and July, so
Yeah.
they
Well,
will come back.
we wanna have the options, but if
Yeah, it's just
you
too
already know
bad.
they're problematic with some sort of constituent
Yeah.
and then
like
we're
Calmetto.
also having to, you know, do this additional testing and maybe we put them on a standby with the option of trying to bring them back and we'd have like a year process, right, to try to, I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
it's,
the ones
It's
that.
not that simple.
The 7 there that are the active are kind of just the ones that we have to have
Yeah,
through the every
We're
year.
not, okay.
they're not emergency wells. Those other ones are not, they will be used.
Okay,
And then plats 2, we did disconnect. We took a photo, we sent that to them. They've received since that January 30th, sending all these responses. Yesterday I received back from them. They have everything and they're just out of all of these items, they'll be looking for that update for plats 4 and with regards to Calmetto and what we have plans for Calmetto. So anyways, they've received everything. We sampled everything. We're in good shape.
great.
Good job.
Is that what I basically inspected, identified, DDW inspected, identified, TCSD has addressed action items, increased sampling requirements ongoing. So, and that's across the board. I mean, if it's not one thing, it's another. So we go right from an SLS inventory, a lead service line inventory, and then we're into a sanitary survey. And we'll be doing a cross connection program as well. I mean, it's just the regulatory requirements never cease.
How often is the sanitary survey?
Every 3 years. Every 3 years, we have a sanitary survey.
Right. California is really strict about their water. Well, they're strict about everything, let's be honest.
Item 7, update to utilities position descriptions and staffing discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to brief the committee on this particular topic. Over time, we've made minor updates to our essentially minimum requirements, minimum qualifications for job descriptions as needed. And this was an opportunity, Justin and I kind of reviewed our current job description requirements for the utility worker classification and the utility operator classifications. And this is the bulk of the folks that do this, to perform all the duties that Justin's been talking about tonight. And so we see this as a good time to kind of make some minor changes to those classifications, and I wanted to brief you on that. And I also wanted to talk about just the staffing levels and what my expectations are going into the next year in terms of potentially looking at some minor reorganizations that affects the utilities division. In anticipation for all the items that we talked about, primarily the new general order wastewater permit and having to, and not wanting wait until the deadlines are here before we begin to ready ourselves. We put together I'm not sure how helpful this is gonna be, this little, not helpful at all at that scale.
Yeah.
This really simple little diagram that talks so again, we have, in our current, position classification, we have a utility worker series, which is intended to kind of funnel into the utility operator series. In other words, the district is able to fill positions at whatever level. If we have a vacancy in the utility operator position, we can fill it as an operator 1, 2, or 3, or even a worker 1, 2, and 3. And then those folks could eventually move up based on experience and certification. So the worker 1 is the most entry-level full-time position we have in the utilities division. And the change is there's a lot of requirements here, but the things that we're proposing to change are what's spelled out. For the worker 1, 6 months experience, and then within 6 months acquire a distribution 1 certification. That's existing. The proposal is to just require somebody to have some basic labor experience, not have an expectation of having certifications as a utility worker 1.
Do you guys pay for the D1 if they want to get it?
Yes. We'll pay for a limited amount of training and the test and the certification. But some of these certifications, they can also come to us already having obtained them. Currently, the worker 2 is 2 years of experience, possession of a D1, again, distribution 1 and a treatment 1. And then within 6 months to acquire a Class A license with air brake endorsement. We're proposing
That
to,
would be at T1 or
and a
D1?
D1, both,
or both?
currently both. The proposal is to add more experience, less emphasis on the certification at this worker level, but have experience, a couple years of experience equivalent to a utility worker 1 classification, and to reduce that requirement of a Class A to a Class C. And I'll get into that in just a minute because we've kind of, the Class A, Class C is a bigger issue. And then the worker 3 would be currently 3 years experience. It would go to 4 years experience or 3 years experience at the equivalent of a utility worker 2, eliminate the Class A but require a Class C, and then now have the ability to obtain a D1, T1 distribution 1 or treatment 1 within 12 months of appointment as a worker 3. Again, the idea here under our it is the workers are not necessarily certified operators. They're folks that are learning the trades, and we give them the tools to acquire skills and training so they can become successful as that operator level. So this is, while there's more experience that would be required, less emphasis on the certification at that level. If we go over here to the operator, right now, the requirement is, of course, by the time they'd have this, currently they'd be required to have a D1, T1 and get an OIT within 3 months. An OIT is the wastewater side, operator in training. That is simply a registration. There is no testing to become an operator in training. It's simply a registration that we perform essentially on the employee's behalf. The proposal would be to either have a D1, T1 or a wastewater treatment 1, or the ability to obtain within 12 months to become an operator 1 in the future. We'd eliminate the Class A and go to a Class C requirement, but require 2 years of experience in the operation of maintenance or equivalent of 1 year as a utility worker 3. So again, more of that transition from a utility worker to utility operator classification. So these aren't very significant changes, but kind of just a streamlining. Under the operator 2, currently we require a D2, a T2, and a wastewater 1. We would require a D2, a T2, or a wastewater 2, one or the other. Right now, this really goes back to the district's sort of history. We were a water system long before we were a wastewater system, and so some of this stuff, this sort of wastewater coming on the tail end, is buried into some of these classifications. And our experience is our folks have a lot harder time becoming wastewater certified than water certified. And so we have a lot more confidence if we hire somebody who has a wastewater background, but not a water background, that they're gonna be able to obtain the water background and not necessarily vice versa. We've had folks that have struggled, who have successfully worked in the water industry for many years, but have struggled to become wastewater certified. So this provides kind of a either or approach.
So would we wanna have like the designation of wastewater operator and water operators then? That can-
That's not what's proposed, but I don't wanna go into the committee level, but at this meeting, but that's, there's a lot of value in having cross-trained or cross-certified employees, because we have this tiny little crew. You know, very small staff.
It might be a little hard to find folks that are both water and.
Well, we have them now, but you're right,
We're lucky.
we are.
Keep those guys.
This is our definition, there's no
We get to
legal
decide.
or whatever.
Yeah, we get to
it says.
decide. Here's what ends up happening is the state tells us what is the minimum requirements to operate our system and then we have to have at least one person who meets those requirements. Again, the same issue in the Class A versus Class C, more emphasis on the experience. And then we get to a wastewater 3, I'm sorry, an operator 3. Right now our requirements D2, treatment 2 and wastewater 2. And the proposal is to go to a D3, treatment 2, wastewater 2, and include a collection system certification or the ability to obtain. Right now, we do not require collection system certification. A little bit more emphasis on the experience, eliminate the Class A requirement. The Class A requirement, we're proposing that rather than it become a requirement for certain levels of certification, the industry standard is just to pay a premium. A premium is what we're proposing is that there'd be like a 2.5% premium for those who maintain a Class A. We don't need the most skilled persons don't need to be the ones who also know how to drive a truck and trailer. We don't need those on day-to-day activities. We need those when we're for either planned construction activities or during the case of an emergency, we need to have multiple people on site. So having a class, we don't need, if you happen to come here as a T2 and D2 and a wastewater collections person, we don't want the Class A to become an obstacle or an inability for us to hire you at that level. If you get it, great, we want to recognize that, but it's not essential that everybody has it, but we do need some folks to have it. Over time, we're reducing the amount of equipment that requires that. We have a dump trailer now, so you don't have to operate the dump truck, for example, to perform the same tasks. So some of this stuff is just sort of historic. And then there's some minor changes that are proposed for the senior operator level. Again, right now it's D3, T3, and ability to obtain a wastewater treatment 2 within 18 months. And we're proposing that to go to a higher level, D4, T3, wastewater treatment 3, and a collection system 3, or the ability to obtain within 12 months. And then more emphasis on the experience, and then also for this level, a 2.5% incentive pay if the operator obtains, senior operator obtains a qualified applicator's license. We need to have somebody on the district staff that maintains this license so that we can purchase and safely apply pesticides and herbicides and train others to apply those. We also have this similar requirement on the parks maintenance classification, but in case we were to lose somebody, we don't want to go a period of time without being able to utilize these products. So this is kind of tweaks. The idea here is that nobody would change their classification just because they fall out of compliance with a job change. But in order to achieve a promotion or qualify for a promotion, they'd have to become qualified under the new system. So there's no takeaway here. In fact, there would be a couple of ways for folks to earn slightly more money, because of that Class A, incentive pay.
So that's on all of these, that plus 2.5%,
The Class A,
yeah, on every position.
Would you guys pay for someone to go get a Class A?
we paid for a lot of people to go Class A. It's very expensive. I'm not sure I'd be so motivated to do it if we had enough Class A folks.
Yeah.
In the future. Cause we'd actually be paying for it. We'd be paying a premium if they obtained it.
Well, if you're desperate for Class A people, it sounds like you've gotten away from needing that, so.
Yeah, well, we need to have a few. We need to have, there's a need to move equipment around, but we don't need to have, not everybody needs to have it in order for us to be able to do the job.
Sure.
It would become a problem if the folks we have now left. And we didn't have Class A, and then we're fine. Nobody can drive the dump.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the piece of equipment that's really essential is probably our vacuum trailer, because that can be used on an emergency. That can be used on an emergency. We don't really have a replacement.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the kind of concept here. I think, this is not something we flushed out with our staff, but I'll do so before we make any formal changes to make sure everybody kind of understands why and what some of the pros and cons are before those are implemented. But we wanted to run that by you, get some feedback from the committee. And then maybe secondarily, and more importantly, I wanted to kind of discuss, look, right now, we operate at a very lean staff level. And at the time, the district brought on out of water.
Talking about so much water, you're needing more water.
I can't, yeah, we're wasting too much sampling. When we brought on the East Side Force Main project, we built into the rate structure to add 2 additional staff members. Because that's what we thought we needed. At the time, initially, we increased our staff by one additional utility operator. And didn't add the second one. So the rates, the water and sewer rates support another individual. That's why we've been accruing a surplus each year, because we're charging the customers to have another staff member that never have filled that position. And I'm gonna likely recommend that we fund another position in the utility classifications starting in July, so that we are as ready as possible to take on the new requirements of the general permit. And may recommend that we fill that at a slightly higher level, because we really need to free up some, the permit is no longer gonna require, more work, but it's a lot more of the regulatory work, reporting, requirements and those kinds of items. And so the goal would be to free up some more administrative functionality within the utilities division. So the rates support it. They have since 2018. We've never added that position, but I wanted to just brief you on that and take any questions that you might have about that approach. It will not cost the ratepayers more because they're already paying for it, but it will mean that there's less of a surplus in revenue over expenditures because of it.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of using experience over necessarily certifications. I know I don't have a bachelor's degree, and sometimes companies look at me, and even though I got a decade of experience, they're like, well, you don't have a bachelor's. Okay, so, quick question, would there be any, talking about SCADA, would there be any ability to upgrade some of the SCADA on some of these things that maybe, and I think employing people is good, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but is there any SCADA, while you're doing these exercises, is there a way to take some of that money, upgrade some of the infrastructure of the SCADA to be able to cover some of this monitoring type stuff? I don't know the answer to that, but I just figured I'd throw that out there. If you're gonna spend 50, 60, 80 grand, whatever it is, maybe there's a way you could take that money and throw it into some SCADA, and then that produces information for you that is a little bit more readily available. Again, I'm a fan of hiring people.
Justin's probably gonna address the SCADA status. I mean, when things are working great, we have that information. What we have is like reliability problem challenges with SCADA, and it's not cutting edge stuff, but our crew, our on-call person can monitor all the equipment remotely, all the key sites through the SCADA system. so.
Yeah, the SCADA system, some of those components are antiquated.
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
no longer manufactured, but, you know, as far as optimization, technology and instrumentation, all those sorts of things, in play. You know, it will be interesting to see what the master plan comes up with. It will be interesting to see what, implications, what comes out of the general permit and meeting the general permit requirements. What comes out of a new nacimiento turnout and filtration and downstream wells over the creek side. Right now, our staff are, you know, inundated with,
Paperwork.
on the daily with paperwork, but I mean, you know, our staff were, 3 of our staff were dealing with 7 meters. They ran 7 new services today. And so we had 1 staff going around doing rounds. And so it's just those boots on the ground, hands-on, with reporting requirements. My time, 100, like, I mean, I am doing all of the reporting right now for Templeton for excluding the permit reporting. I want to make sure it's for the permit reporting. I'm doing all the collection system. I'm getting some help with data entry, but for the most part, I'm in there doing everything from CARB and the zero emissions vehicles and smogs to pesticides to hazardous chemicals with the county. I mean, it's just the DDW and the monthly reports that I do with the DDW. I mean, it's just the Regional Water Control Board. So I have requirements to collect that data and provide reports for the Regional Water Control Board. And it's just it's boots on the ground, but then the reporting is just everything keeps increasing. Lead service line, we just got through that. That was our team going around and collecting data for each meter in town, you know, for 7-8 months. We had to have staff going through and looking at each service and looking at the pipe type as California
Yeah, I remember that.
implements yet again another, you know, requirement to meet. So it's quite a lot.
It sounds like it. Anyway, those were my only questions. I think it's you guys know better.
We'll be looking at those opportunities. Absolutely.
Yeah, see if there's maybe there's something that'll pop out some data and
Yeah.
it saves you, 10 hours a month or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, I'm sure there might be something out there, so I would definitely utilize technology to the best of your guys' ability, but. Cool.
Yeah, on that note, I don't know if the incorporation of GIS, which we've recently, the board has approved to move forward with that, would possibly help with some of that related stuff but we also need people that are gonna help populate that information. So we have a system, but we also have the need to, have people that put additional information or tweak stuff that are knowledgeable of that level of, technology as well. So like having some additional staff. to
Yeah.
help with that,
Everybody needs a little
Always
bit
helpful.
more help these days.
yeah.
With it. Okay. Cool.
Can we put that GIS experience on one of these?
Any other
A
questions?
plus 2.5%.
Happy.
All right. Then under item 8, future agenda items.
Well, we've already scheduled another meeting for 2 weeks tentatively.
Yeah.
Is there any other items you wanted to review at that meeting?
I think just that one would be sufficient for what we're trying to accomplish, I think.
We'll try and get that updated RFP draft.
Yeah, the 13th, I think was the goal.
Yeah, in order for us to, I think,
Thursday
make the meeting
before.
on the 19th, our goal would be to get that posted by the 13th. So, the week before so you'd have time to review it.
Cool. That sounds
Thank you.
like a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for your time.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I realized my boots were a little more muddy than I anticipated, so I got a little bit of dirt on them. So I apologize for that.
No worries.
We'll send you a bill.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah. Put it on my tab.
Okay, so
Well, I didn't realize they were so,
Money on the bottom.
cleaned them off, but
Good to adjourn?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay,